the learning outcomes from my point of view are that by the end of this session, you would be able to describe what theories of change involve and the rationale for using them, and how they inform and complement other approaches of planning as well. Because sometimes in organizations, people are quite adamant in the way of things they do, and they may want you to develop log frames or logic models in a certain way. So that's fine. Your theory of change process would actually enhance and complement that rather than detract from it. You will also be able to illustrate various elements of Burns Rehab theory of change process to inform and populate your causal pathway. And together we will produce the causal pathway, which will be a tangible output that we will be able to show, which will also be our communication tool from what our vision is back to where we started from. So thank you, Samin. At this point, before I start, I would like to hand over to Professor Naseem Chowdhury so that she can set the context by telling us about the program. So just briefly, Naseem, could you kindly just set the scene for us?
Thank you. So a group of multidisciplinary professionals interested in this work, because we know that burn services in Pakistan are really far from what adequate services should be. So we are applying for an NIHR grant, and our aim is that the application is about developing and evaluating a culturally adapted model of rehab services for burn survivors that can be implemented just not in Pakistan, but across LAMICs. I mean, burns every day, about 30,000 people suffer new burn injuries. 90% of burns occur in low and middle income countries. And 75% of these die before they reach a hospital in transportation. So really a huge area. Number of physical consequences, the scars, contractures, physical pain, disfigurement, psychological sequelae, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, depression, social consequences because they are socially isolated. So how we want to achieve this is through 7 work packages, and I'll take you through. Those. It's the package 1 work package is about qualitative work, because we want to understand the lived experiences of these burn survivors, their families, and other stakeholders who are involved in burn care. We also want to identify what kind of interventions are needed and how can we implement it. The work package 2 will be setting up burn registers. We want to map what is the existing mechanisms in Pakistan for registering burn victims and burn details. And we want to help set up registers that are according to the WHO model of burn registers. Our work package 3 will be about social media campaign and addressing stigma. And what we want to do is we want to engage the communities nationwide as we want to inform them about risks and prevention. Work package 4 is around research capacity, capability building of staff, task shifting, because we know that qualified specialists are far and few. Work package 5 will be the development of the rehab program. We'll do an external pilot RCT because we want to determine whether it's feasible, it's acceptable, about a recruitment, randomization, retention, so we can go for a full powered trial. And work package 6 will be an RCT for clinical and cost effectiveness. Work package 7 is how we nationally, provincially, and district-wise work with relevant stakeholders so that we can make a difference in policies and the pathways for burn care. So Rakshi, this was just a brief of why we are doing it and how we are doing it.
Thank you so much, Naseem. It sounds amazing. It sounds very ambitious, but I know the need is there. I mean, to me, it sounds like eating a whole elephant, but with you dividing it into work packages, it's, taking bite-sized chunks to make it more manageable and also deliverable. As you all know, Naseem's already mentioned that, there are lots of burns victims and all these things, when we go and we're doing research or we are implementing services, it's for people and around people. So any change that we want to bring about, it actually is real change that happens to real people. For that reason, I'm going to just share with you the story of Adnan. Adnan is actually my friend's grandchild, and she has agreed that I can share his story with you. And Adnan is not his real name, and they live in North America. So he has gone through quite a good burns rehab pathway. He was 4 years old when he got his burns injury. What happened was he also have two younger siblings. He was playing in his neighbor's backyard with their kids. The night before, the neighbors had lit a fire pit in their backyard, and they thought that they had extinguished the fire. However, as it happened, sadly, and there was still wood and coal smoldering underneath the ashes, and unfortunately, Adnan, he was 4 at that time. He fell into the fire and got third-degree burns. He burnt his hand, his arm. He got burns on his face and also along his thigh as well. He was in hospital for 6 weeks, and now he's 9. He has had several skin grafts, operations. Very recently, he's still had another operation, and it's going to, his care and his rehab is going to be long-term. So just thinking about Adnan, who do you think, who would be involved in bringing about the change apart from ourselves? So can we move on to the next slide, Samin, please? So some of the questions I would like you to think about, just maybe a 30-second reflection, which groups of people or institutions might have an influence on Adnan's life and choices he makes? Can we move on? So I've just given you an example. So some of the very key stakeholders in his life are his parents, of course. So what they would like him to do is stay healthy and well, that he integrates in school, he develops self-confidence and self-esteem. So that's just an example of one stakeholder that is involved very directly into Adnan's life. Thinking of these stakeholders group, but others as well, what aims might they have for Adnan? What do they want him to become? So just thinking outside the box as well, outside his immediate family, outside the professional team that Naseem has just talked about. Who else would be influencing the changes? So which would have an influence on Adnan's life? So if we go to the next slide, please.
Ma'am, is it visible to you?
No, I'm still on the previous slide. Yeah. So I just want you to just reflect on about our own roles as researchers into contributing to real change in real people's life. and how we can apply this thinking when we are planning projects and programs, especially such a program like Burns, which is so much needed. The rehab care is almost non-existent, but also is quite an ambitious program. Can we unmute people so that we could share some comments for just about half a minute?
Yes, ma'am. Anybody who wants to go ahead, please.
Who would like to go
Yes,
first?
Farooq. Farooq would like to.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, as a researcher, I think we should look into the available facilities. Like as far as I know, that in the twin cities, Islamabad and Rawalpindi, we have 35 lakh population and having just one burn center for the whole population. So we should look into the available resources, and then definitely community awareness as well, because it is playing a key role in the prevention and kind of remedies.
Thank you. So you mean service provision as well as community really telling us, because obviously these things happen in the community, is for them to come forward as well. Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so as I said, you know, when you're thinking about your professionals, your services, also think outside. Who else need to be involved? Maybe there would be voluntary organizations that can bring quite a lot of skills and strength towards your program. Maybe there are specific, if you have your multidisciplinary team, maybe you haven't thought about how critical role of the physiotherapy team might provide. And obviously, Professor Naseem and the team in PIL is coming from the mental health point of view as well. So just think, you know, who else can make it more robust and rigorous?
Actually, schools, the schools will also be able to play an important role.
Absolutely.
Integrated and, you know, so the stigma and social inclusion doesn't remain.
And the fire service, you know, I mean, I know in the UK, and also when my friend was telling me about North America, she was saying that at Christmas time, the firemen just brought their fire trucks, and the children with burn injuries, they were allowed to play. And, you know, the firemen just talked to them about how they extinguish the fire and things like that. So taking away that fear. So we need to think about who else can actually enhance our team. So now we'll get on to what actually is a theory of change. Can we change the slide, please? Today, there seems to be quite a lull between the change of slides. It must be the connectivity. So I want to just tell you about this Brazilian social scientist and educator, Paulo Freire, who was, he wrote The Pedagogy of Oppression, where he said that the teacher, the student, and science need to work together to tackle oppression and inequality. And he was also, at that time in the 60s, observing that there were some unethical research practices happening, and people were not actually listening to the marginalized group for whom they were doing research, or in the name of whom they were doing research. So he developed this theory of change model to enable poor and marginalized people to have a say in their own development. So to make sure that our vision really develops from the point of view of the end beneficiary. Thank you, Sumi. So theory of change is a process that should come before you start planning, and which brings together key stakeholders. Like today, you know, we should start, the sooner you can start the better it is. And as we talked about different stakeholders, maybe today's session would give us some ideas as to who else we need to involve. Agree how change will really happen for our target group and in the current context, because as context changes, inshallah, we'll come out of COVID and things would be very different. So we will then look at our model differently. We will also think maybe we could involve some other stakeholders, or some stakeholders at this point, their contribution may become more indirect. So we will then look and identify our roles and responsibilities and our contributions. We will develop the model. And it's not a plan, it's a model that is more causal. It's not a descriptive plan or a very linear plan. It's sort of changes as the context changes. So you test and adapt that model as the context changes, but also as you go along, you're learning. You're going to have some successes and you'll also have some failures. And the learning that comes out of it is really going to strengthen the way you take things forward. Yes, Sami?
Ma'am, it's changing, but I think there's a minute of delay in for you to view it, but I'm changing it alongside.
That's right. So these are the 6 stages, and I'm going to take you through the first 4 stages today. So we can change this slide because I'll describe them as we go along. Maybe technology is giving us time to reflect as we go along. So it can't be a bad thing. So a couple of key points to note is that theory of change is a process, an approach. It is not a tool. I have heard a lot of people who come with their theory of change, causal pathway, the diagram, and they say, oh, this is our theory of change. And it may be somebody just sitting in a room on their own and drawing it and then, say that we've done theory of change. Theory of change is about the stakeholders coming together. And I don't think there are any prototypes of theories of change. As long as we go through the process, we have the key stakeholders together, develop the vision together, and our deliverables are to benefit our target group. And our vision is through the eyes of the end beneficiaries. And the most important thing, I think, is ownership and buy-in from all the key stakeholders, because as they take on their roles and responsibilities, we are all linked together to deliver. And if they don't take it as seriously as they should, then it could cause problems. So as I said to you, we'll go through the 4 stages today. But as I also mentioned before, that you may find that, sometimes when you're writing your grant applications, there is a certain way a funder would want you to express how you're going to be delivering. They would want you to do a logic model or whatever. But that's fine, because as I said to you before, theory of change process actually enhances and complements your other approaches. So a simple a framework for developing a theory of change narrative is that you start with identifying the problem. You do your needs assessment, as Naseem has already said, and then you bring your stakeholders together. Together, you identify what barriers you may encounter, what opportunities there are, what drivers of change there may be. Then you develop your vision of success. That needs to be in place, and so that you are able to have a shared vision rather than everybody thinking it from their point of view. As stakeholders come together, everybody comes on the same page on their roles and responsibilities and the commitments they have towards the program. You then develop your planned pathway and you put your short, medium, long-term goals on it. You then develop your activities and tasks, ask some learning questions, some assumptions that you would make in the current context, and also all the time asking, is this the best way we should be doing things? Or maybe there's a different way of doing it. So as you look at your activities and your short, medium, long-term goals, you should be asking all those questions. And as you're reflecting, as you're going along, as I said before, as the context changes and the learning you are gathering as you're going along, you need to readjust your assumptions so that your theory of change model is more dynamic and live. Okay, Sami. So this is just in a nutshell, the whole process. This really picture is just showing to you, giving you the difference between accountability evaluation and impact assessment. So when you are doing your project, you need to evaluate it, and you have to prove to your funders that you have spent the money how you have said, you have delivered the project as you have said to it. You have to prove to your target group that you have done what you were going to do. So you're accountable to them. But as you go along, the learning that comes out of it, actually the impact that is making, or any failures that you have had, actually helps you to take forward into your next projects and improve the way you deliver your projects. Okay. So when do you develop them? There are various times you could, when you're preparing a new strategic plan, applying for a new grant as we are doing now, or to inform an evaluation or impact assessment. But, as we all have very limited time, you find that rarely people give this the importance, although obviously I'm really passionate about it. And I feel that initially, if you spend the time and develop the process properly together with all your key stakeholders, it is really beneficial in the long run, but very few organizations develop it in that way. A couple of points of caution here would be that it doesn't provide you with a magic solution. You do need time and resources. You need to choose the right time to also, embark on the journey. Like at the moment, I think it's the right time before you're actually starting off on this journey. If you don't take participation and ownership seriously at whatever level you're doing your theory of change, as I said to you before, it just becomes a paper exercise. You would do it, you'll put it in a file, and it'll go into a file box on a shelf and probably never come out again. And, that's really a waste of time. So our stage one is about, as I said, that we have done the needs assessment. We know, there is a problem. So now we've got our key stakeholders together. Are we changing? So it's nearly time for you guys to be doing some work, as I've been talking a lot. So thinking about how change could happen in relation to a particular issue, which is our burns, development of a burns rehab service. What factors in the external context help or hinder change? So also thinking about Adnan, and thinking about his external context, who has the power to influence change either positively or negatively, who needs to change, and at what level. So as I said to you, that this thinking needs to go beyond the interventions. As Naseem said, we should be thinking about the school as well. We should be thinking about the neighbors as well, the community as well, as Farooq said. So, please try and think quite openly, do the blue sky, big picture thinking. So just before we get to our first activity, just want to say that there are different ways of understanding how change happens. And I mean, you all are academics. Maybe you I don't know if you prefer to commission a research paper or do problem tree analysis, take a more academic approach. Or you might find that some social scientists, they prefer to have a or public engagement people want to have a very participatory research analysis approach. And they go and they talk with the grassroots and get their success stories. To me, I think it is really bringing the two together, and you develop, and that approach really is quite robust and rigorous. So now we are just going to be looking at the potential challenges and barriers that a program can face. And they could be at different levels. They could be very much at the household level. The values people bring, the ideas, the beliefs can have an impact on the change, whether it would be a barrier or it would be an opportunity. Again, when you'll come to implementing the service, what kind of barriers and challenges and consequences that would create, and also all to policy level. And as Naseem said, if it's going to be for all LEMIC, then every country would have their sub-values and ideas and beliefs as well. Okay, Samin? So now we are going to do an activity, which is, we've decided on the change we want to make for our target group. We want to develop good practice burns rehab service. So the barriers, challenges, and opportunities which would contribute towards achieving this change and may not achieve it solely on its own. So as I said before, just this team cannot achieve the change that we are wanting to bring about. What will the consequences be? So I'm going to be giving you 10 minutes. Samin, how many people do we have altogether? Sorry, I didn't look at the participants.
I'll just check one. And we have 16 people.
16 people. I think we could have two groups, eight okay, in each group. And okay. Naseem, is that okay if we have two groups?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and for each group, I think, Amir, could you be sort of facilitate and maybe have a note taker in your group? And then in the other group, Naseem, who would you suggest who could do that?
We've got Farooq. Farooq can be in the other group.
Okay, Farooq, could you please? And so you've got your activity packs. And if you like, I think in your workroom, you will also have the whiteboard as well. You can either bring it up on your whiteboard and scribe, but it would be nice when we come back together to share it as well. So Samin is going to put people, I think, just randomly into the two groups. And you then just go and identify barrier, challenges, consequences, and any mitigations and solutions you could think of. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
The rooms are open now.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
People can join the rooms now.
Thank you, Ami.
We talked about stigma, and then the consequences of them would be preventing, the stigma can prevent them to go outside home and participate in rehabilitation activities, and mitigating strategy can be the raising awareness. Mm-hmm. Another was lack of trained health professionals. Mm-hmm. In the country. So then with the consequences can be the quality of care provided to victims, and the mitigating strategies to train the trainer model, like increasing capacity building of health professionals. And I think the rest of things have been covered in the first group.
Thank you so much, Ami. So this is, the point you raised about stigma as well is my friend said that the mother of the child, Adnan's mother, actually before he was going back into mainstream schooling, she did flyers and posters and went and gave talks in assembly as well, so that people were, because obviously people are always curious as well. So that helped as well. So maybe supporting the family as well, so that they feel empowered to talk about it more. Thank you very much. So now step 2 to this stage is that we agree a vision of success in relation to our project. So if all our issues and problems and their underlying causes are successfully addressed, what would this look like? So you need to be quite specific about your vision. Just in 25 words, you need to articulate as to what you expect to happen and for whom. So because we don't have a lot of time today, I have prepared something. I looked at your proposal and prepared something. Now, we could maybe just have a little, 30-second discussion on you think it's okay or what we need to add or not. So I think, well, from my perspective, I thought that the team is wanting to minimize adverse effects caused by injury by minimizing scarring and maximizing functional ability, psychological well-being, and social integration. I can already criticize it, but I'll see what feedback I get from people.
I think we should specify the injury, adverse effects by burn injury.
Okay.
So it's clear where the vision is going.
Yeah. So can somebody make a note of that, please? Anything else, anybody? No? I'm just now, having reflected on it, to me as a lay person, I think some of the language and the terminology is probably not very user-friendly. What do people think? Could we soften the language, make it simpler? Anybody has any comments, or do you think that's fine?
I think Rashid explains, it's quite self-explanatory because
Okay.
I can't think of making it any simpler. So maybe, it's just, it says it really well.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm happy to take criticism, but yeah, that's fine. Okay, but it would be quite good to, where you have your user group, etc., to put it by them as well. Okay, let's move forward, please, Sumit. So now we come to our second stage, which is we are going to be identifying our stakeholders' contributions, whether they'll be directly contributing or indirectly contributing, what their roles and responsibilities are. So say the mental health team has said, we're going to do this, this, and this. So how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, and obviously, if they have given a timeline or said that, what they're going to do and how, to make sure that they are committed to that and deliver. Yes, Samin. Sorry, it's mine, yes. So just again, if we could just have a minute or so to just referring to the vision, the barriers and challenges and consequences that we identified, what could be the main drivers for change. So can we just share these if Samin, if people can unmute themselves and if they have any ideas.
They can, ma'am. They can unmute themselves.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. First of all, parents, the community, teachers, and hospital staff. Definitely, media is like can play a role.
Okay. And what could be the main driver for change? You've done the who. Anybody else?
So are we talking about barriers and challenges as well?
You know, when you think about, you know, we've got our vision, we've thought about the barriers and challenges. So what would be the main drivers for change? So, I mean, one of the driver is that the service is almost non-existent. As Farooq said, in lakhs of people in Islamabad, there's only one budget. So the driver would be that the service is limited. And who would be the driver? Probably at the moment, maybe this is the driver, but also the driver would be the burns injury people. So does that make sense? Okay, should we move on? Because I think I've taken more than a minute. So this is just clarifying your own potential for influencing change and that of your partners. So this element is just, as I keep on saying, that, you know, you're not the only one in this. There are others as well. So analyzing and agreeing how and where your project is going to be most effectively contributing to the positive changes that would be happening to somebody like Adnan. It's important to understand that you're only a cog in the wheel, you're only a small player in the whole change process. You need to really think about which small contribution to make the biggest impact. So, you know, maybe within your proposal as well, prioritize as to what would be most impactful and maybe focus on that. I don't know, maybe there are separate teams doing work packages, but within the resources you have, prioritize what small contribution is going to make the biggest impact. Okay. So now there's two activities that would be happening together. So the first one would be, what would it look like if this group of stakeholders were actively working to make our vision a reality? We have a vision, how would they be working together? What would they be thinking and doing differently? Because at the moment, you know, everybody's fragmented, we brought them together. What would they put in place? What they need to do and how they need to do it. So again, thinking about stakeholders, how they'll make the vision a reality, what they would be doing. So maybe specifically talk about each stakeholder. Now, we haven't got time for all stakeholders, but you will see maybe three, if you even focus on a couple of stakeholders, it just, my voice is echoing back. Are you all okay listening to me okay? Yeah?
Who is Muhammad?
It did start to echo.
Who is
I'm
Muhammad?
just checking if there is anybody who's... I'm just checking if there is anybody whose mic is on mute. Mic is on. We're all good.
Yeah, we're all good. Okay, so we have so we have 10 minutes to do two exercises. So we have 10 minutes. It's still echoing. Is everybody muted?
Ma'am, I found the issue. I've sorted it out. It was Mr. Muhammad Saim. I've muted them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So I've just given you an example of the first exercise you'll be doing, which is thinking about your stakeholders, who is going to be directly contributing to this program and who might be indirectly contributing. So I've given the example of the parents. that the change they're wanting is that he stays healthy and well, both physically and mentally. So how they will be contributing towards that. Indirectly, it's our policymakers. So policymakers, we will be producing the evidence base, and we will be then putting pressure with the rest of the stakeholders to give priority to burn survivors and their families' health and well-being. So this is just the difference between the two direct and indirect contributors. Next slide. Yeah. So this is what I was talking about. You've already got your vision. If you could just think about putting in no more than 25 minutes as to what and how each stakeholder would be contributing to making your vision a reality. So, okay, Samin is going to put you back into your workrooms. Have fun as well,
Yes, ma'am.
guys.
We now have 9 participants in each work group, so I'm opening the rooms now.
Okay. Thank you. Amir, would you like to go first?
Yes.
Please. Go ahead.
So we discussed the direct contributors. Direct contributors are service users, and the change we would expect is improved quality of life, improved functioning, and obviously the mental and physical health. We discussed service providers, health professionals. They will be more trained and more informed. We discussed family, and there will be improved interpersonal relationship, reduced disease burden on family. Yeah, we discussed the direct contributors, community organizations. The indirect contributors are funding bodies, like the change we expect is having a rehab programs funded. The media is obviously the stakeholder, and in helping in raising awareness. The wider community we discussed, obviously lawmakers and policymakers, and making in policies, informed policies, and preventing incidents.
Good. You've done a lot of work in this time. Well done. Do you want to share your other one before we go on to the other group?
Yes. So we agreed what you provided us the vision. So we haven't written this vision, but
Okay.
we have written the stakeholders supporting the vision. So it's parents, service users, the teachers, health professionals, and obviously the firefighters, media, and wider community, including the policymakers and lawyers.
Yeah. Okay. So you've put who they are, but you haven't had time to say how they will contribute. Okay. Thank you. That's great. Farouk, is there anything additional that your group would like to share?
Let me share the screen. So what we identified, like the direct stakeholders. So these are parents, and what we change directly expect from them is to ensure the safety, teachers to be more inclusive in education, siblings that can help in the prevention, extended family also in the prevention, members, friends, physiotherapists, others. uh, Better health facilities, better understanding, better training and understanding, better services, rural as well. So now this one is really important. Like as we talked earlier, that we have resources in the urban settings, but we do not have as much service in the rural background. So it is important that, like, we should have services over there as well. And in the indirect contributors, we have policy makers to make better policies, researchers to identify the needs and gaps, law enforcement agencies to implement the policies, and the last one is national disaster management, which is a department and helping out throughout the country, like in the artificial and national disasters.
Thank you. So this is, all the list of stakeholders. It would be good to reflect after this session. Have we got all these here today? Or are these all involved? And are we able to then, if they're not, are we able to contact them and involve them as well? Okay, excellent work. I am running slightly over, but I had allowed 5 minutes for a comfort break. Do people want it, or shall I carry on? Shall I carry on?
Carry on. People can take a break if they want between individually.
Okay. So Samin, can we move forward, please? So just before we go on to a third stage, I just want to just reiterate the point around how theory of change is not the same as a logic model. So a logic model is actually, it usually starts with a program and it describes each component. However, a theory of change is more, it usually starts with getting the stakeholders together and think about the vision, and then it goes backward as to what we need to have in place. So logic model is more about describing the different components and more linear, while the causal model, which is our theory of change model, is more about every time we have a goal, we want to see how and what we're going to do and how it links to our outcomes. So it's causal, and when our context changes, as I said before, we revisit and we think that whether it's still applicable or not. So just wanted to reiterate at this point. Thanks. Again, this is just reiterating the difference between a strategy, program, plans, a road view. I mean, we have a roadmap from our Prime Minister here about the COVID, and he's given us dates, but he has mentioned that there might be some assumptions he's made, but I would like to see whether it's a causal pathway or just a plan, more logic model style. So theory of change gives us a more helicopter view, so that we are able to proactively go and change where our circumstances change. Thanks, Sumi. Again, this is just saying that we can have a theory of change, down to a department level as well, as long as that theory of change, it speaks to at organization level or either at national level. Again, just talking about the UK, we are having some reforms, health and social care reforms again. And now any of a theory of change, whether it's at regional level or it's going to be at organizational level, would need to speak to the one at the top, and the top needs to speak to the one at the bottom. So now we are going to be thinking about developing our change pathway. And this relates directly to our understanding of how change happens. So remember, we talked about Adnan and just real change happens to real people, and how the contributors actually impact and influence the change that happens to him. It describes in detail our unique ways of understanding and addressing these issues, who is going to be working with whom, how we work with them to achieve and influence change, the assumptions we will be making to design our pathway. So we need to be thinking about that all the time. So this is just showing you a pathway which looks very messy when you look at. And as I always say, that life is messy. We are having to interact with different people. There are linkages. And if one stakeholder is not going to be delivering, it's going to impact on other stakeholders, which will impact on our activities, which will impact on our outcomes. So, it's showing the whole causal pathway. So it's telling you about what we do, who our key stakeholders are, then the vision, and then we always read our causal pathway backwards as to what we have to put in place to achieve our vision. Okay, Samin. So now, before we actually do our pathway, we need to have our long-term, medium-term, and short-term outcomes for our target population, and they will be arranged on the pathway afterwards. But at this point, we will be doing an exercise to be articulating our short, medium, and long-term goals. So this is another 10-minute exercise that we'll be doing together. So I'm trying to allow quite a bit of time so that at the end of the session, you have enough outputs to put together your talk narrative document. Okay,
Should we
Sameer?
begin?
Yes.
Our group is back.
Jay,
Okay.
everyone is back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on, Sameer, while you're there, you get started.
Okay.
Would you like to share, please?
So we have our short-term goal is apply for funding, and the medium one is got the funding, hopefully, and
Okay.
the long-term goal is completing the project time and target. Then our next short-term goal is advertising for staff, and medium is interviewing and hiring of the staff, and training of the staff is long-term goal. Our next is set mapping and literature review and develop the register. And the long-term goal is implementing of the burn registry across the country. Our next short-term goal is developing topic guides for qualitative research and training around the topic guides for the researchers. And the long-term goal is better understanding of patients' perspectives with regard to the qualitative one. Our next short-term goal is getting basic health units and secondary health services on board. And the medium term is capacity building of the health professionals in these services. And the long term is trained health professionals and better services for survivors. A long-term goal is engagement of service users and community. And the medium one is more informed community and service users. And the long term is better functioning community and service users. Our next one is engaging media and social media, and medium one is a media campaign, and the long term is better prevention and reduce stigma and improve social isolation. Next one is engaging policymakers. Medium one is developing pathways to care, and implementation of policies is the long term. Our next goal is completing the project and start writing, and dissemination of the findings to other LAMICs is our final long-term goal.
This is excellent. It's excellent. But when you will put, how are you going to articulate all this on one pathway, or you are going to have, I suppose, for each work packages, a talk pathway for each one, and then you can have one umbrella one.
What do you suggest, Rakshi? We did debate this.
Yes.
What did you suggest when we first started? We weren't sure.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better?
Yeah, I would suggest that you have for each work package a talk pathway, and then you would have one for as an umbrella one, because when you're saying for the last one completing the project, you're completing the project comes in your long term for your first one. So it's not going to be your short term completing the project on the umbrella one, but it would be on your work package of when you are disseminating it into the LAMIC countries. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You guys have done loads of work in these 10 minutes. I'm really impressed. Thank you. Farooq, how about the next group?
Yes, ma'am, let me share the screen.
Anything to add?
Yes, ma'am, you have done completely different work.
Yeah, that's fine. That's why we need different perspectives and different stakeholders together.
Yes, ma'am. So our first short-term goal is to increase research capacity in this area. or medium
Mhm.
well-being, sustaining this area of research and better informed policy. Then knowledge of transfer in the region, or medium well-being, like the knowledge will be transferred nationally and then globally. Same as for the training of the staff in the site, separate the community in the target sites, lower the burn incidents well-being, and then a separate national and global community. And reduce stigma, better help seeking, improve mental health, and better social integration. And
Great.
that's it. Thank
You guys have done loads as well. So, you know, it'll be really great when we come to do the umbrella one, to have all this inputted on the umbrella pathway for the whole program. And thanks. Should we move on? So this is really saying, you know, how your project's pathways develop. So as I said to you before, that you work backwards. So I've just given here an example of community leaders act as role models in the community and challenge negative behavior. That's my vision. So for me to achieve my vision, I will need to think about what will it take to enable them to do this, who will need to be doing what, and what we need to have in place so that our community leaders are going to be role models and they challenge negative behavior. So, but when to get to this, what do I need to have in place? I need to have in place community leaders adopt more positive attitudes towards issues. So again, I will be thinking the same thing, that what do we need to have in place? Who would need to be doing what? So you keep doing it with your, so then I start with community leaders, understand the consequences of their behavior. And the first thing I would want to do, my very short-term goal would be, we raise awareness about issues with community leaders. So my vision being that they become role models, but where I'm starting from is that I will first raise awareness, because until they will be aware, they can't become role models. Okay, thank you, Samin. Again, this is really showing you the same pathway, that we have the vision, we have our long-term, medium-term, short-term goals, we have our stakeholders together to decide what we will be doing, and we always read the pathway backwards. Samin, thanks. Okay, now we get to identifying our assumptions that we will need to be testing throughout the life of our program. So assumptions are something that is accepted as true and likely to happen, but I don't have the proof. So in the morning, I was thinking that I will be delivering the workshop, but it was an assumption. But now when I'm doing it, it has happened, kind of thing. So my assumption was quite explicit at that point that I will be doing. And I had this in my diary, I will be doing my workshop at 12 o'clock UK time. Okay, so it was quite specific and it linked to my pathway of delivering my workshop. So just testing the logic and your assumptions. So each of the links that you have made, you have to ask yourself the following question. Why did I think that such and such would lead to such and such? What makes you think that? So we talked about the barriers, we talked about the opportunities before. So they could be cost, opposing views, lack of trust, capacity, technology, people losing assets. So are there any missing links? Is there anybody we haven't thought about? So when we are looking at the pathway, we need to also think about, is there a better way of achieving our goal? Are there things that we are not so sure about or confident about? So, you know, thinking that all the time. So it's a very reflective learning exercise as you go along. So now what do we as stakeholders do to achieve our short, medium, and long-term goals? So now we've got our goals, but what activities do we need to do? What assumptions do we have to make to achieve our outcomes? So there again, over to you guys. Next is you've got your template of tasks and assumptions. So if you can think of what tasks you will be making, what assumptions you'll make, and give you 10 minutes to do that. Out?
In another 20 seconds.
Okay. I think we'll let Farouk go first this time.
Ma'am, as Farooq is not here, so I will speak on his behalf.
Okay, please do. Thank you.
So, ma'am, first is to like train staff for management and resume same nutrition level. Second one is to organize a social media campaign, as we assume that most of the individuals, everyone like nowadays is on social media. They are on at least each platform. So third task is to interview stakeholders for the qualitative part to identify common set of themes. And next one is to achieve things on the national level. And we assume to have support from the governments, like from the permission, or like if they can arrange things for that. And to reduce stigma, we would set a common approach across communities, regions, and different age groups. Last one, for generalizing things globally, we will have same social practices and same patterns of burn injury.
Excellent. Thank you. Amir, anything to add? Thank you, Bilal. Anything to add with from the other group?
Yeah, so the task is submitting the application on time, and the assumption is getting the funding. Task is apply ethics approval, and assumption is research ethics committees will approve the project. And task is applying for permissions and networking, and getting on board, getting people on board is assumption. Task is advertising, and assumption is getting good staff. Task is stakeholders on board, and assumption is stakeholders ownership to the project. Task is train the staff, and assumption is the staff will be trained. Task is intervention delivery, and assumption is intervention acceptable to participant. Our task is develop register, and assumption is burn register in place across burn settings. Media campaign another task, and assumption is reduction of stigma and enhanced awareness. Pathways to care for burn survivors is a task, and implementing in policy and routine care is our assumption. Yeah, that's all.
Excellent. Thank you. You guys have done such a lot of work in this short time. Thank you. Okay, Samin, shall we move on? Because I'm getting excited. It's all going to come together quite soon, which is great. So just before we actually get on to developing our burns rehabilitation causal pathway, I just want to just synthesis of the learning so far. We started with just identifying the problem, what the need was. We got the stakeholders together. We then looked at our barriers and challenges and their consequences. Then we got to identify who's going to directly contribute, who's going to indirectly contribute, who's going to do what, and clarifying their roles. And then we looked at our short, medium, long, we looked at our vision, which is really important, vision, especially from the point of view of our target group. Then we put in going backward, we put in our long, medium, and short-term goals. We then looked at what activities we had to do and what assumptions we've made. So due to the time constraint today, I was going to show you the whole process that this client of mine followed. These were a group of people in East London, and they have kindly given me the permission to just put these slides in my presentations. And they're a group of Tamil people, and they wanted to improve mental health services, but they felt quite disempowered. They felt everything was very fragmented. They spent 5 days, 2 days to actually develop their vision. And then we went through the whole process. I just wanted to show you that at the end, this is their pathway that they put their vision together, all the stakeholders were, and this is how they articulated it, which yours would be like this soon. Next slide, Samit. I just wanted to show that the logic model as well, because they insisted that they wanted to produce a logic model as well, because some of the stakeholders wanted it articulated like that. And what I told you, they felt quite disempowered to start with, but how they articulated their logic model was, as a result of our work, Tamil community demands improved quality of mental health services, which are needs-based and inclusive, so that people are empowered, informed about their rights, and are resilient. So just look at the language, how it changed during the process. It was not just the learning, but the confidence that came out of it was, I really felt that we had done some good work. And they're continuing to do some amazing work now. I just want to remind you about now going back to developing our pathway. To develop our pathway, it's best to work backwards, as I said to you before, and we would identify the sequence of change. The key questions to ask every time: what will it take for this change to really happen? Who would do what? How we would be doing it? How we will be behaving? But when we come to read our pathway, we read it from left to right. So I've just given it as an example that we will culturally adapt Burns' rehab service model and develop it so that burn survivors have access to culturally adapted Burns rehab service, so that burn survivors' adverse effects are minimized. And between that, there would be some goals as well and outcomes as well. Now, I know we are going to run a bit over, but it's really important for you to have 10 minutes to develop your Burns rehabilitation causal pathway. So Samin's going to put you in your workrooms again. And when we finish, we will have this output. Thank you. Amir, would you like to share your pathway, please? Okay, I didn't expect it to be fully done, but well done. You guys have got the idea. So would you take us through it quickly?
Yeah. So we will still complete it and we can send it to you. So we have started from our vision backwards, that our long-term changes will be improved lives of burn survivors and families, including care pathways in place and less burn injuries, and develop burn registry. And planned short and medium-sized changes are well-informed workforce, better functioning in communities, including the trained staff, well-informed communities, and engaged policymakers. And our activities are cultural adaptation and of the rehabilitation program, social media campaign, and training material, completing the training material and community awareness. And our key stakeholders are, we've already completed: patients, family, media, health professionals and researchers, community leaders, policymakers.
Well done. Yeah, very good. Just maybe a bit of thinking around assumptions as well, but very well done in this short time. So Is the next group, is it Bilal going to present? Or?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am, I will.
Thank you.
So our key stakeholders, as we have written, media persons, healthcare providers, researchers, services, and policymakers. So we will be going through a social media campaign to raise awareness, and that will lead to better quality of life, improve social integration. So from healthcare providers, researchers, we will go through rehabilitation, better management of burn in primary health care hospitals. That will lead to better care, and we will organize PPI groups from service users and policymakers. So that will lead to better policies, uh, in turn, low incidents and lower complications of burn, resulting in improved burn care. And we will have a medium term having burn registry to improve collection of evidence that will lead to better improved burn care. And our overall vision of the case is improved infrastructure and decreased incidence of burn.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's, again, you both groups have got the idea. Obviously, it takes a lot more time than 10 minutes to do it. But maybe is somebody going to amalgamate all the work that we've done? I will send you a template for the theory of change narrative document, so that you can just bring together everything, all the work that everybody has done. So just before we finish, I just want to just share with you some of the advantages that people feel in applying theory of change. It provides a framework for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, help to build common understanding, which I hope people found that that's what it's doing. Also support partnership. It also gives clarity and focus to the programs, guides organizational development, empowers people who participate, and can be used as a powerful communication tool. Because as you saw in one diagram, you could see who your stakeholders were, what you needed to do, and how you got to your vision. So that's really great. As I said to you before, that there are 6 elements, but today we've already run over time, and we haven't really focused on the monitoring and evaluation and the impact assessment, which we will do at a later time. So if anybody wants to share any of the learning, please do. That'll be great. Or any questions or comments, that'll be good. It'd be nice for people to, if they have anything to share, to do so. But if people have had enough, then that's fine as well.
Maybe you could share your questions through email later with your work on the same email that you received your link and the activity package on, and I can forward it to Mr. Akshi.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, for me, this is it. And you guys have worked really, really well over the 2 and a bit hours. And hopefully good luck with it, and I'll be there to support as and when you guys need me.
Thank you very much, Rakshi. Thank you. Very useful. I'm so excited because our pathway is nearly complete. So well done, and you did it in such short notice. So thank you for all your support with this.
You're welcome. And this is why I think, you've done the work while you've been doing the session, which is also great. So thank you all, and Khuda Hafiz. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.